Are you planning a Disney World trip with teenagers? There are some things you might want to consider that are different when they're older because they're not little kids, but they're not quite adults. So they're kind of in this in between phase where there's some opportunities, but not full freedom like you would if you were 18 plus. Let's talk through some of those things to help you plan. Hi, I'm Shannon from wjprepschool.com, and I love helping people plan their Disney World trips. One of the things that I have noticed in talking to people on my podcast, because I interview people about their trips, is that when people go with kids, they're always surprised that their kids are so different than last time. It really is like a snapshot in time. You could take your kids at 3, 6, 10, 14, and every single phase is going to look different. And for some parents, it's quite sad because it's like, well, they're not into characters anymore. They're not into this. But you could also reframe it as an opportunity to do new things that you couldn't before. So that is definitely true for teenagers. And you want to think about some things as you're planning. Some of those that we're going to talk about are privacy, your schedule, like your daily routine, the activities that you do, food, freedom or independence, and finally, their interests. And before we dive into each of these topics, I just want to note that I know there's a big difference between 13 and 17. So adjust this advice according to wherever you're at, maturity-wise, age-wise, etc. Let's first talk about privacy. Now, your family may have traveled when you had little kids and everybody was totally fine to fit in a single hotel room with 2 beds. But as kids get older, they often need more space and more privacy. And that is also true during Disney World trips. They might want their own bed or maybe even a separate room. Because of this, you might consider new arrangements that you hadn't before. One of those is that you could get multiple rooms at a value resort, maybe even with a connecting door so that everybody has their own bed and there's extra bathroom space. There are also suites available, like at All Star Music, where it feels a little bit more like an apartment. And many rooms at the moderate and deluxe levels actually have an extra bed, a fifth sleeper is what they're sometimes called. However, at the moderate level, the beds are usually quite small and they max out around 5 foot tall. So they're better suited to kids that are younger and not teenagers. However, many deluxe hotels, their extra bed is more twin size, so it can be a little bit better for some teenagers. You might also consider staying in a DVC villa because these come in big spaces. They're really like houses with multiple bedrooms, multiple sleeping spaces, etc. There is also offsite where you can rent a whole house and everybody gets their own bedroom and everything just like at home, but there are a lot of trade-offs, including on-site benefits. And one of the biggest ones that you'll miss out on is the ability to use on-site transportation, which we'll talk about more in just a minute. And that can be a huge perk when traveling with teenagers, is having on-site transportation available. So be sure to choose your hotel wisely based on your current needs with your teenager, but those are some things to keep in mind. Next up, let's talk about the schedule. So we are rope droppers hardcore. We have 6 a.m. alarms. We're there when the park's open, but with teenagers, that may not work. It has been proven that they wake up every day with melatonin in their system, which is why many school districts have advised that high school start later in the day because teenagers aren't even quite awake at that time of day. They're not necessarily trying to be rebellious. They literally just feel tired. And that carries over to Disney World, where a lot of teenagers aren't going to want to get up early and rope drop with you. They may like staying up really late, but they're not going to want to get up at 6 a.m. Obviously, they don't need naps anymore. And so you can kind of configure your schedule accordingly. You might consider a non-rope drop strategy and booking lightning lanes that start midday so that you at least have those rides secured, but you don't have to be there when the park's open. Also, very, very, very strongly encourage you to look at after hours events as a replacement for your park ticket for the day. We love after hours events, and I would 100% do them with teenagers. 3 of the 4 parks have them, all except Animal Kingdom, and they are scheduled off and on from January through September. I'll link to the after hours of information in the description so that you know, but I would book these if I was traveling with a teenager. Another late night option is extended evening theme park hours, and these are available to people staying in deluxe or villa resorts. I already talked about how the deluxes and villa resorts might come in handy if you need extra sleeping space. And so this could be another perk of that, which is about twice a week you can stay late in a park and not have to worry about the crowds. Next up, let's talk about activities, because some activities are not available to little kids, but they are to teenagers. Disney has what they call enchanting extras, which include tours, and some of those have age minimums that you can't do until you hit a certain age. That includes Keys to the Kingdom, which you have to be 16 years old for, and the Wilderness Back Trail Adventure Segway Tour, which you also have to be 16 years old for. Another example is going to Savvy's workshop. It's not a tour, but it's an enchanting extra. One person in your group has to be 14 years old. So if you do Savvy's workshop with a young kid, usually you will have to book it for an adult and then a child can accompany you. But if you're 14 or older, you can do it without having to have your parent. So that can be great for if you have a Star Wars loving kid, but maybe the parents aren't necessarily needing to be there or to build the lightsaber. So check into the activities as you plan and see what's available now that you have a teenager. Next up, let's talk about food. This can be a big category when you're traveling with a teen because they might like trying more food than they did when they were younger. They also might have a much bigger appetite. So, places that serve food family style or at a buffet could be much, much better for kids that just need to eat and eat and eat. You also might consider using the Disney dining plan because it can give your teenagers more freedom to choose their meals and their snacks without having to worry about the cost of it and the cash that you would need to normally pay for like a snack if they were out on their own. And so the Disney dining plan might be great. I don't recommend it for younger teenagers that maybe don't have a big appetite because they will be charged as adults on the Disney dining plan. But if you have a teenager that does have a big appetite, the Disney dining plan might be a perfect fit. Next, let's talk about one of my favorite topics, which is freedom and independence. So teenagers can really experiment with having a lot more freedom at Disney World that maybe they can't even do at home. First of all, they can have their own My Disney Experience account and the My Disney Experience app. So they can see your plans within the app. They can also book lightning see dining reservations, etc. They can check wait times. They can be a big part of it. You also can grant them charging privileges. So if they want to go out on their own and charge, souvenir purchases or snacks to the room, then you can give them that ability if you want. Another thing to consider is allowing them to navigate on their own. So if you've never had a kid that navigated on their own away from you, then it might be fun to just give it a try. Like they want to stay a little longer in a park or they want to leave a park before you. Well, they can head on a bus or a Skyliner or whatever your method of transportation is. And that can be a really good opportunity for them just to kind of do stuff on their own. In addition, they might want to exercise the freedom to do totally separate things, like in the parks. Maybe they like thrill rides and you don't. Maybe you have multiple teenagers that want to go and do things, shop and do things that the parents aren't interested in. So consider building that into your plans for your trip. And lastly, let's talk about their interests because maybe I should have talked about this first. Because when you're doing your planning for this trip, you definitely want to look at their interests and figure out what to incorporate. Little kids, usually, obviously, you want to consider their interests as well. But with teenagers, they're much more established. So they may have very specific ideas. So you have a kid that's interested in art. Does that mean you're going to go during Festival of the Arts? Or if you have a kid that really is into swimming, do you want to spend more time in the pool? This sort of thing. So definitely consider their interests and figure out how to tailor it to them. I mentioned that I have a podcast where I interview people about their own trips and that I enjoy seeing the different phases. One of the things that we do with these episodes is we categorize them by travel style. Are you traveling with little ones? Are you traveling abroad, etc.? But one of those categories is traveling with teens. So if you're interested in listening to some trip reports about families who have traveled with teens, most recently, we've had episodes 477 and 485 that included families traveling with teenagers in their groups if you would like to listen. If you have other ideas on traveling with teens or questions about it, feel free to leave those in the comments. And thanks for watching.